My parents told people they treated their kids the same. They spent $347,000 on my brother. They spent nothing on me. I don't mean less, I mean nothing. Not a tuition check, not a security deposit, not a bridesmaid dress. And then they threw him a grand opening party, 83 guests, a string quartet, champagne toasts. My mother stood in the middle of that room, lifted her glass, and said the sentence I will never forget as long as I live. She had no idea what she was standing inside. None of them did. And by the end of the night, every single person in that room was going to find out exactly what this family had been hiding. Now, if this story is going to stay with you, and trust me, this one doesn't leave easy, go ahead and hit subscribe. Because what my mother said in front of those 83 people, and what my father did when the truth came out, that's all coming. If you're listening right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's in this with me tonight. Let me take you back to Birmingham. The fall I turned 12. The fall everything started, even though I didn't see it yet. My parents are Gerald and Constance Beckett. Dad was an insurance adjuster for State Farm for 31 years. Mom taught 4th grade at Avondale Elementary until she retired in 2019. Good people by every visible measurement. Church every Sunday. Block party hosts. The couple other parents pointed at and said, "That's how you do it." And they had 2 kids. My brother, Warren, born in 1987. Me, born in 1991. 4 years apart. That gap doesn't sound like much, but it was enough. Warren got there first. First to college, first to have a wedding, first to need money. And by the time I needed anything, the account was always empty. Warren ate first. I ate what was left. And what was left was usually nothing. I want to be fair here. Warren wasn't a villain. He wasn't scheming behind doors or whispering in their ears. He was just the son. The one my father talked about at barbecues. The one my mother framed photos of on the mantle. I had photos up there too. 2. Warren had 11. I counted once when I was 16, then felt stupid for counting, then counted again 6 months later to make sure I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. The first time the money gap became real, not just a feeling but a number, was August 2004. Warren got accepted to Samford University. Not a scholarship. Full sticker price. My parents paid every semester. 4 years. They took a second mortgage on the house on Claremont Avenue to make it happen. Dad told me at dinner, his voice thick with pride, "Your brother's going to be the first Beckett with a 4-year degree." I was 12. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, when it's my turn, they'll do the same for me. They didn't. I graduated high school in 2009. 3rd in my class, full honors. I'd already been accepted to Auburn. Not architecture yet, that came later. But Auburn, with a partial academic scholarship that covered about 40%. I brought the acceptance letter to the kitchen table on a Tuesday night, set it right next to my mom's plate. She read it, smiled, and said, "That's wonderful, Lori. You've always been the practical one." Then she asked me how I planned to pay for the rest. I sat there for a second, just confused. Because Warren's tuition had been a family event, there were discussions, spreadsheets, a refinance meeting at the credit union. When Warren went to school, the whole household reorganized around it. When I went to school, my mother asked me if I'd thought about waitressing. The difference wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden. It was just accepted. Warren's education was an investment. Mine was my problem. I worked 2 jobs the entire time I was at Auburn. Waitressing at a diner off Magnolia and tutoring high school students in math on Saturday mornings. I slept maybe 5 hours a night sophomore year. My GPA dipped to 2.81 semester because I was pulling double shifts during finals week. Nobody in my family noticed. Meanwhile, Warren graduated. Got a job managing a Firestone location. Hated it. Quit after 14 months. Moved back into my parents' house. They covered his rent gap, his car insurance, his credit card bill for 3 months while he found himself. I was 20, paying for my own textbooks with tip money, and my brother was 24, living in his childhood bedroom rent-free. And you know what's strange? I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just tired. The kind of tired that sits in your shoulders and doesn't leave when you sleep. I thought everyone's family had a kid who got the cushion and a kid who got the floor. My junior year, I declared my major in architecture. Something about the precision of it, the blueprints, the load calculations, the way a building either stood or it didn't. That made sense to me. There was no favoritism in physics. A beam held or it collapsed, and nobody's opinion about which kid deserved more changed the equation. My advisor, Professor Nkemdi, pulled me aside after a studio review. He said my work was exceptional. He said I had a spatial intelligence he rarely saw. He said he'd write me any recommendation I needed. Nobody in my family ever asked what my major was. I graduated in 2013 with a 3.6 GPA, a degree in architecture, and $41,000 in student loans. I moved to a studio apartment on the south side of Birmingham. The rent was $635 a month. I ate rice and canned vegetables for 7 months straight. I started my career at a small firm called Barlow and Pace, drafting residential additions for $38,000 a year. That same year, Warren decided he wanted to open a restaurant. He was 26. No restaurant experience, no culinary training, no business plan. My parents gave him $60,000 in seed money. I found out at Thanksgiving. I need to say this carefully because I know how it sounds. I know what people hear when a woman says, "My parents gave my brother more." They hear jealousy. They hear someone keeping score because they're losing. But this wasn't scorekeeping. This was arithmetic. Warren's first restaurant attempt failed inside 9 months. A barbecue place on Lakeshore he called Beckett's Pit. Health code violations, staff turnover, foot traffic that never materialized. He burned through the $60,000 and another $23,000 my parents loaned him on top of it. Did anyone hold him accountable? No. My mother told the family Warren was learning the business. My father said, "You have to spend money to make money." The $83,000 gone in 9 months was reframed as tuition. Warren's real-world MBA. Meanwhile, I got my architectural license in 2015. Passed the ARE on the first attempt. All 7 divisions. Do you know how many people pass all 7 on the first try? Less than 20% nationally. I called my mom to tell her. She said, "That's nice, hun." Then she told me Warren was thinking about trying again with a Cajun concept. And did I have any thoughts on what kind of lighting makes a dining room feel warm? I actually answered the question. I sat in my studio apartment and gave my mother free lighting advice for my brother's next restaurant venture. I didn't register how absurd that was until years later. By 2017, I'd moved to a better firm, Caldwell Reed Associates. Commercial projects, office buildings, mixed-use retail, the kind of work that paid real money. My salary went to $67,000 and then $74,000 within a year. I was the person they pulled into presentations because clients trusted my ability to explain load paths and zoning variances in plain English. And I started saving. Not for a restaurant, not for a dream project funded by someone else. I saved because nobody was going to catch me if I fell. I was $31,000 deep in student loans, with zero family backing. So I saved. By 2019, I had $52,000 in a brokerage account, zero credit card debt, and I'd paid off my car, a 2015 Honda Accord I bought used with 41,000 miles on it. I was proud of that, not in a bragging way, in a quiet, exhausted, I did this alone way. Warren's second restaurant attempt, the Cajun place called Rue, lasted 18 months. He lost another $40,000. My parents covered $25,000 of the losses. And then Warren decided to try a third time. If you've ever watched someone get handed the thing you had to earn yourself, if you know that specific ache of watching somebody else's life get subsidized while yours gets overlooked, then you already know what this next part felt like. Write it in the comments if you know. Because what my parents did next, they pulled $85,000 from their retirement account for his third try. And that wasn't even the worst part. Warren found a building, an old warehouse space on Morris Avenue in downtown Birmingham. High ceilings, exposed brick, the kind of space that's gorgeous if you know what to do with it, and a money pit if you don't. He didn't know what to do with it. My father helped him negotiate the lease. $4,200 a month, triple net. My mother helped him pick a name, Copper and Vine. My parents contributed another $85,000 for the build-out. This was 2022. That $85,000 came from their retirement account. My father told me this at Christmas like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like pulling $85,000 from retirement for your son's third restaurant attempt was just what parents do. I sat at that Christmas table, eating turkey off the same plates my mother had used since 1994, and I realized I'd stopped counting. Not because the gap had closed, because the gap had gotten so wide that counting felt pointless. Here's where it gets complicated. Warren hired a general contractor to renovate the warehouse space. The contractor brought in an architecture firm to handle the structural redesign and permitting. That firm was Caldwell Reed Associates, my firm. The project came in through our commercial division. I wasn't assigned to it initially. My colleague, a guy named Desmond Pryor, was the lead architect. But 3 weeks into the project, Desmond's wife had a complicated pregnancy and he went on family leave. The project got reassigned. I was the only other senior architect in the commercial division with an active restaurant on my portfolio. So the project landed on my desk. I sat in my office staring at the project brief. Client, Warren Beckett. Location, 2714 Morris Avenue. Scope, full interior renovation, structural modification, ADA compliance, commercial kitchen installation. My brother's restaurant, the one my parents were funding, assigned to me. I should have flagged the conflict, but I didn't. Part of me thought, this is just work. I'm a professional. I can separate the two. And part of me, the part I didn't want to look at too closely, thought, they're going to stand inside something I built, and they're not even going to know it. The project took 11 months. I redesigned the kitchen layout to maximize flow between prep, line, and expo. I opened up the mezzanine to create a second dining level that added 38 seats without feeling cramped. I specified the copper-toned light fixtures that became the restaurant's signature look, the ones Warren later told people he'd found at an estate sale in Tuscaloosa. I handled the fire marshal review, the zoning variance for outdoor seating, and the structural reinforcement for the second floor. Warren never knew. He dealt with the GC. The GC dealt with my firm. My name was on every drawing, every permit application, every structural calculation. But Warren never looked at the architectural plans. He looked at the color swatches and the menu and the logo. He never once asked who designed the building he was standing in. And my parents? They visited the construction site 4 times during the build. My mother posted photos on Facebook, hard hat selfies, progress shots, captions about watching Warren's dream come to life. In one photo, you can see the mezzanine framing I designed in the background. She tagged Warren. She tagged my father. She tagged Warren's wife, Nia. She didn't tag me. She didn't know I was there. On the 3rd visit, my father stood in front of the permit board, the one with the architect of record listed. He stared at it, then turned away and said nothing. I should pause here, because some of you are thinking, Lorraine, why didn't you just tell them? That's a fair question. But here's the thing. I'd spent my whole life being the practical one, the one who didn't need anything. If I told them, what would change? They'd say, "Oh, that's nice." The same way my mom said, "That's nice, hun," when I passed my licensing exam. The knowing wouldn't close the gap. It would just give them another reason to say I was being dramatic. So I stayed quiet, and I watched. My name on every page. Their eyes on everything but. What happened at that grand opening, it wasn't what I planned, and it wasn't what anyone expected. The grand opening was set for March 15th, 2024, a Friday. Warren and Nia sent out printed invitations, thick cardstock, embossed copper lettering. I got one. It arrived in my mailbox on February 3rd, tucked between an electric bill and a credit card offer. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of Copper and Vine. Celebrate with us as Warren Beckett opens the doors to Birmingham's newest dining experience. I read it 3 times. Then I stuck it on my refrigerator with a magnet. The weeks leading up to the opening were, I don't even know how to describe it. I watched my mother plan it the way other mothers plan weddings. She had a guest list, a seating arrangement for the VIP tables. She ordered flowers from a shop in Homewood, white hydrangeas and eucalyptus, $1,400 worth. She got Warren a watch, a Tag Heuer, engraved on the back, our greatest investment, Mom and Dad, our greatest investment. I saw the watch because Nia sent a photo to the family group chat. Everyone responded with hearts and congratulations. I sent a thumbs up. The thing is, and I don't like admitting this, I drove past the Beckett's pit location about a week after it closed. The sign was still up, and Warren was sitting in his truck in the empty parking lot, engine off, staring at the building. I almost pulled over. I didn't, but I saw his face through the windshield, jaw tight, eyes fixed on nothing, and he looked broken. It would be simpler if Warren was just selfish, but he was also someone who kept swinging at a dream that kept hitting him back. I need to tell you something about my parents that I don't think people on the outside understand. They didn't hate me. They loved me. They said it. They meant it, in whatever limited way they understood the word. But love and attention are different things. On my 21st birthday, my mother called me at 6 p.m. She'd forgotten until my Aunt Delia reminded her. She wished me happy birthday and then spent 14 minutes telling me about the menu Warren was developing for Rue. I sat on my bed, still holding the phone, and didn't say a word until she was done. That was the gap. Not a dollar amount. A phone call on my birthday that wasn't really about me. Around mid-February, I sat down one Saturday with a legal pad and started writing numbers. Every dollar I could document that my parents had given Warren versus what they'd given me. It took 4 hours. I went through old family emails, holiday conversations stored in my memory, comments my father had made at dinners with specific dollar amounts he'd offered casually the way you'd mention the weather. Samford tuition, $94,000. First restaurant seed money, $60,000. First restaurant bailout, $23,000. Second restaurant losses covered, $25,000. Copper and Vine build-out, $85,000. Wedding, $18,000. 2 cars, $32,000. Security deposits, rent gaps, insurance, roughly $10,000. The number was $347,000. I wrote it at the bottom of the legal pad and stared at it. Then I did the column for my side. $0. 347,000 to nothing. That was the whole story in 2 numbers. I put the legal pad in my desk drawer and went for a drive. 40 minutes down Highway 280 with the windows down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. And I'll tell you something I haven't told anyone. On the drive back, I thought about this one Christmas when I was 14. Warren was at Samford. The house was quiet. My dad and I sat on the back porch and he taught me how to read a blueprint he'd brought home from a claims job, a house that had burned down, the structural diagram showing what held and what collapsed. He was patient that day. He pointed at things and explained them. It was the only time I remember my father teaching me anything one-on-one. I think about that afternoon more than I should, because it tells me he had it in him. He just didn't give it to me again. When I got home, I pulled out my firm's project file for Copper and Vine, found my name on the first page, Lorraine Beckett, AIA, lead architect of record, and I thought, they're going to stand in a room I designed, eating food in a kitchen I laid out, under lights I specified, celebrating my brother's success, and nobody in that room will know I exist in those walls. That's when the idea started forming. Not a plan, exactly. Not yet. Just a question I couldn't stop turning over. What if they found out? I need to tell you about Nia, Warren's wife, because Nia is the reason any of this played out the way it did. Nia Okafor Beckett. She married Warren in 2020. A small ceremony. COVID era. Maybe 30 people in my parents' backyard. My parents paid for the whole thing. About $18,000. I was a bridesmaid. I bought my own dress. $285 from a shop in Trussville. Nia is a quiet person. She's a dental hygienist at a practice in Vestavia Hills. She doesn't talk much at family gatherings. Sits, observes, helps clear plates. For the first couple years, I thought she was just shy. Then I realized she was watching. She called me on a Thursday night in late February, out of nowhere. We'd never really had a one-on-one conversation before. Lorraine, she said, I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth. I said, okay. Did you design Copper and Vine? I didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Steady, waiting. How did you know? I asked. She said she'd been helping Warren organize his business files, the LLC paperwork, the insurance certificates, the construction permits, and she found the architectural drawings. Every single sheet had a stamp in the lower right corner. Caldwell Reed Associates, architect of record, Lorraine Beckett, AIA. She'd stared at my name for 10 minutes before she called me. Does Warren know? I asked. No, she said. He's never looked at the architectural plans. He doesn't even know what AIA means. And then Nia said something that stopped me. She said, Lorraine, your parents came to the construction site 4 times. Your mother posted about it online. Your father shook the contractor's hand, and not one of them, not Warren, not your parents, ever said your name, even when it was written on every page. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, I've been watching this family for 4 years. And I've never said anything because I thought maybe I was reading it wrong. But $347,000 to nothing isn't something you misread. I said, how do you know that number? She said, because I did the same math you did about a year ago. I just never told anyone. That was the moment everything changed. Not because Nia had evidence, not because she had a plan, but because, for the first time in my life, someone in that family looked at the same numbers I'd been staring at for 20 years and said, I see it too. I actually had to sit down, My legs just, I don't know, they stopped holding me for a second. Here's my question for you, and I need real answers. If you were Nia, if you married into a family and you saw this kind of disparity happening right in front of you, would you speak up? Would you risk your own marriage to tell the truth? Or would you keep watching and stay quiet? Drop it in the comments, because what Nia did next, she didn't just speak, she showed up. And it cost her something. What I didn't know yet, what Nia hadn't told me on that phone call, was that she'd found something else in Warren's files, something neither of us expected. Nia came to my apartment 3 days later, a Sunday afternoon. She brought a manila folder and 2 iced coffees from a place on Highland Avenue. We sat at my kitchen table, this little round table I'd bought secondhand from a woman in Pelham for $45, and she opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, not Warren's business accounts, my parents' personal accounts, statements going back to 2019. How did you get these? I asked. She said Warren had power of attorney over my parents' finances. Had since 2021, when my father started having memory issues, nothing severe, but enough that my mother got nervous. She asked Warren to be the backup signer, not me, Warren. And because Warren had access, and because Nia was the one who actually organized his paperwork, she'd seen everything. She pointed to a line item from September 2022, a transfer of $85,000 from Gerald and Constance Beckett's joint retirement account to Warren Beckett's business, LLC, the Copper and Vine build-out money. I already knew about that, but then she pointed to something I didn't know. A second transfer, January 2023, $54,000 from the same retirement account. Payee, Warren Beckett Personal Checking. I looked at Nia. That's not in the restaurant budget, she said. I've gone through every line item. That $54,000 didn't go to Copper and Vine. It went to Warren, and nobody told your parents what it was for. I sat there. I think my mouth was open. I'm not sure. Because here's what that meant. The number wasn't $347,000. It was $401,000. And $54,000 of it Warren had taken without telling anyone what it was for. Not the restaurant. Not a business expense. Just money moved from my parents' retirement into his personal checking while he had power of attorney. Does my mother know? I whispered. Nia shook her head. Your mother signs whatever Warren puts in front of her. She trusts him. She doesn't read the statements. I need to stop here and be honest with you. Up until this moment, I'd been angry at my parents. They chose. They handed everything to Warren and nothing to me. That was their favoritism, their blindness. But this was different. This wasn't my parents choosing Warren. This was Warren taking from my parents, from their retirement, from their future, while they trusted him with everything. And for half a second, just half a second, I looked at those bank statements and I didn't see my brother. I saw someone who'd been handed so much that he'd forgotten other people's money wasn't his to take. My parents enabled it. They created a person who believed the world owed him the next check, because it always had. But they didn't deserve to be stolen from. I don't know, that part still gets me. Because even after everything, even after $347,000 to zero, and you've always been the practical one, and 11 photos to 2, they were still my parents. And someone was taking from them, and they didn't even know. The grand opening was in 16 days. Here's the part where I need to be careful, because what I did next, some of you are going to agree with it, and some of you aren't. I didn't confront Warren privately. I didn't call my parents and tell them about the $54,000. I didn't go to a lawyer. Not right away. Instead, first thing Monday morning, I called my firm's managing partner, Treva Ellison, and told her the truth. I told her the Copper and Vine project was my brother's restaurant, that I'd completed the work without disclosing the relationship, and that I'd discovered financial irregularities involving my parents. Treva was quiet for about 15 seconds. Then she said, "Lorraine, you should have disclosed this at assignment. You know that. I know. But the work was clean? Every permit passed, every inspection signed off. The building is structurally sound and code compliant. She exhaled. Okay, the disclosure failure is on you. We'll deal with that internally. But the financial issue, that's not a firm matter. That's a family matter. What do you want to do? What did I want to do? I'd spent 22 years watching my brother get everything. 11 months designing a building he'd never know was mine. I'd just found out he'd taken $54,000 from our parents' retirement. And in 16 days, my family was going to stand in a room I'd built and toast my brother as their greatest investment. What did I want to do? I wanted them to know. All of it. Every dollar, every drawing, every ignored phone call, every, "That's nice, hun." But I didn't want revenge. I need you to understand that. Revenge would have been leaking the bank statements, filing a report about the $54,000, showing up with a megaphone and a printed spreadsheet. I didn't want to destroy my family. I wanted them to see me. For the first time in 34 years, I wanted them to actually see me. So here's what I did. I asked Treva if the firm could send a representative to the grand opening. Standard practice for completed commercial projects. A congratulatory gesture. She said yes. She said she'd go herself if I wanted. I said no. I wanted to go. As the architect of record. And I called Nia. I told her what I was planning. Not a scene, not an ambush, just showing up as myself. Lorraine Beckett, AIA, the woman who designed the building, with my firm's project portfolio, with the blueprints that had my name on every page. Nia was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What about the $54,000? I said, "That's between Warren and our parents. I'm not going to be the one to expose it. Not at the opening." She said, "What if it comes out anyway?" I said, "Then it comes out." And the truth is, I knew it would. Because I knew my mother. I knew that once she found out I'd designed the building, she'd start asking questions. And once she started asking questions, the answers would lead to the bank statements. And once the bank statements surfaced, everything would fall. I didn't need to light the fire. I just needed to open the door. I told myself it wasn't revenge. And I mostly believed that. But there was a part of me, small, quiet, honest, that wanted to see the look on their faces. I'm not proud of that. But I'm not going to pretend it wasn't there. 13 days. If you want to be there when those doors open, subscribe now, because this is the part you don't want to miss. And here's the thought that kept me up at night, the one I couldn't shake no matter how many times I turned it over. The people who are supposed to know you best are sometimes the ones who've never looked. If you've made it this far, if you already know you need to see what happens when those doors open, tell me in the comments, would you have walked in the way I did? Or would you have handled it differently? Because in 13 days, I was going to stand in a room full of people who'd spent my entire life looking past me. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let them. What happened next? I still can't believe my mother said what she said. In front of everyone. The night arrived. March 15th, 2024, 6 p.m. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror in the apartment on the south side and buttoned the cuffs of a charcoal blazer I'd bought 2 days earlier from a shop on 20th Street. $98. Not designer. Just clean lines and a good fit. I wore my hair down. First time in months. I don't know why that felt important. It just did. I drove to Morris Avenue. Parked 2 blocks south of the restaurant. I could see the glow from the windows. Warm copper light. The fixtures I'd specified. Radiating onto the sidewalk. A small crowd at the entrance. People in nice clothes. Holding wine glasses. Laughing. I sat in my car for 6 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard. 6:41 to 6:47. Then I picked up the leather portfolio from my passenger seat, the one with the Caldwell Reed logo embossed on the front. containing the complete architectural drawings for Copper and Vine, and I walked in. The space was beautiful. I'm allowed to say that because I made it beautiful. The exposed brick I'd cleaned up, the mezzanine I'd opened, the copper pendants hanging at exactly 28 inches below the ceiling joists, just the way I'd drawn them. 83 people. My parents, Warren, Mia, my Aunt Delia, Uncle Ray, the general contractor, 2 city council members, the food editor from Birmingham Magazine, and the whole Mountain Brook circle my parents had cultivated for decades. My mother saw me first. She was standing near the bar in a navy dress, champagne glass in hand. She smiled when she saw me. A real smile. "Laurie, you came. You look nice." "Thanks, Mom."
"Your brother's in the kitchen if you want to say hi. He's been running around all day." She laughed. "This is really something, isn't it? Look at this place." I looked around, at the mezzanine, at the light fixtures, at the structural columns I'd reinforced to carry the second-floor load. "Yeah," I said, "it really is." At 7:15, Warren stepped out of the kitchen. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, the tag Heuer on his wrist catching the copper light. He looked happy, genuinely happy. He hugged people, shook hands, posed for photos. Warren was always the charming one. At 7:30, my father clinked a fork against his glass. The room quieted. Gerald Beckett, 68 years old, gray at the temples, standing in the center of the restaurant with his wife beside him, surrounded by 83 people who respected them. "I want to say a few words about my son," he said. And he did. He talked about Warren's persistence. 3 tries, 3 failures, and a comeback. He talked about believing in your kids, about how proud he and Constance were to have raised a son who never gave up. He didn't mention me, not once. Then my mother took the glass from my father's hand and lifted it higher, and she said the sentence I will never forget as long as I live. She said, "This is what happens when you invest in your children." The room applauded. People raised their glasses. Warren ducked his head in that modest way he does, hand on the back of his neck. Nia, standing next to him, looked directly at me across the room. I didn't plan what happened next. I didn't walk in there with a speech prepared. I had a portfolio under my arm and a number written on a legal pad in my desk drawer at home, and 22 years of being the practical one. But when my mother said, "This is what happens when you invest in your children," something just broke, quietly, like a thread that had been holding too much weight for too long. I walked to the front of the room. Not fast, not slow. My hands were shaking. I could feel it in the portfolio, a slight rattle against my ribs. My mother was still standing there with the champagne glass. My father had his arm around Warren's shoulders. And I said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Mom, do you know who designed this building?" She blinked. "What?" Someone near the bar coughed. A glass clinked on a table somewhere behind me. "This building, the one we're standing in. Do you know who designed it?" She looked at Warren. Warren looked at the general contractor. The contractor looked at me. I opened the portfolio, held up the title page. My name, right there, lower right corner. Lorraine Beckett, AIA. My voice caught. I said it again. "That's me. I designed Copper and Vine. Every wall, every beam, every fixture you're standing under. I drew it. I permitted it. I certified it." The room went dead quiet. I could hear the kitchen fan running. My mother's champagne glass was still in the air. She hadn't put it down. She was looking at the drawing. My name, in the corner she'd been looking past for 11 months. My father dropped his arm from Warren's shoulder, and his face, I'll never forget this, went still in a way that wasn't surprise. It was recognition. The stillness a person gets when they already knew something they'd been refusing to look at. He'd stood in front of that permit board. He'd seen my name, and he'd turned away.
That's... My mother started. She looked at my father. Gerald, did you know about this? My father didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He looked at the floor. Warren hadn't said a word. His face was blank. His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. And then Nia stepped forward. Nia didn't raise her voice. She never does. But her voice wasn't steady either. She started, stopped, then pushed through. I found the architectural plans in Warren's business files 2 weeks ago, she said. Every page. Lorraine's name on it. She's been the lead architect on this project from the beginning. Your son never looked at the plans. He didn't know, but the information has been there the whole time. My mother looked at me. Lori, why didn't you tell us? And I said, I don't even know where this came from. It just fell out. Would you have listened? The room was still frozen. 83 people holding wine glasses and appetizer plates, standing inside walls I'd designed. My Aunt Delia had her hand over her mouth. Uncle Ray was staring at the floor. Near the back, Patience Greer, the Sunday school teacher, slowly shook her head. A small, tight shake. The kind you give when something you'd suspected for years finally gets confirmed. My father said, Lorraine, this is not the time or the place for this. I said, when was the time, Dad? When was the place? Because I've been waiting 34 years, and the time never came. That's when my mother's composure cracked. She turned to Warren and said, Did you know?
Warren shook his head. No, Mom, I swear I didn't. You didn't look, I said. You never looked. My name was on every page and you never once looked at who built your restaurant. And that landed. I could see it land. Not just on Warren, on the room, on the neighbors, on the church friends, on the food editor from Birmingham Magazine who was standing near the bar with her phone in her hand. My father tried to take control. He said, Lorraine, we can discuss this at home. This is your brother's night. It's his night in my building, Dad. Dead silence. And then, this is the part I didn't plan, the part that changed everything. My mother said something to my father. She said it quietly, but the room was so silent that everyone heard. She said, Gerald, how much did we give her? My father didn't answer. Gerald, how much? Constance, how much did we give Lorraine? For college, for her apartment, for her car, for anything. How much? He didn't answer because the answer was 0, and he knew it. And now 83 people were waiting for the number. My mother turned to me, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not guilt, exactly. More like the first crack in a wall she'd built around a truth she'd never examined. For half a second, I didn't see the woman who said, You've always been the practical one. I saw someone realizing they'd spent 30 years telling themselves a story that wasn't true. Then it was gone. Her spine straightened. Her chin lifted. She turned to the room and said, This is a family matter. We'll handle it privately. But Nia wasn't done. Constance, Nia said, and the whole room turned. There's one more thing. In January of 2023, $54,000 was transferred from your retirement account to Warren's personal checking. Not the business account, his personal account. And there are smaller transfers too, 9 of them over 18 months, totaling another $11,500. $65,500. None of it on any restaurant budget I've seen. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand. It hit the concrete floor and bounced, champagne splashing across the polished surface I'd specified. Warren's face went white. I didn't. Mom, come on, he said. The bank statements are in your office, Nia said. 3rd drawer. Warren looked at Nia, his own wife.
The woman he'd married in my parents' backyard. The woman who'd spent 4 years watching and waiting and organizing his files. He looked at her and he said, "And this is the one that still sits in my chest. You had no right to go through my things." Not, "That's a misunderstanding." Not, "I can explain." Not, "Mom, Dad, let me tell you what that was for." You had no right. And every person in that room understood. Warren's first instinct when confronted with $65,500 missing with his parents' retirement wasn't to explain it. It was to blame the person who found it. My mother sat down, right there, in the middle of the restaurant, on one of the copper bar stools I'd positioned at 36 inches high. She sat down and didn't say anything. My father stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder. He looked old. He looked like a man who'd just realized the son he'd spent $347,000 on had taken $54,000 more when looking. Sometimes I wonder if I set the whole thing up more carefully than I want to admit. If some part of me knew exactly how each domino would fall. You don't have a clean account for that. I'm not sure I ever with. And I stood there, in the middle of copper and bond, of holding the architectural plans with my name on them, watching the building I'd designed hold the weight of a truth that was finally visible. The grand opening didn't end that night. Not formally. People 6. Some because they were uncomfortable leaving. Some because they concerned threw away. The food came out anyway. The croom. They's some out the appetizers on schedule. I watching at 840p Dark Street. Got in and sob and sat there engine on. I telling the end chest was tight. That airless pressure you with across holding your breath too long. I watching I'd feel terror. I just felt hollow. 22 years of carrying the weight across the watching. And you're telling no who I with of. Then the tear. Not loud, not dramatic, just checking about off. I doing with about it on you're at the first across with your friends. And your family was unsee structural damage with watching at you. My mother called me 2 days after the opening. A Sunday morning. She said, "I need to talk to you about the money." We sat in her kitchen on Claremont Avenue. The same kitchen where she'd asked me how I planned to pay for college, and she asked me to show her the numbers. I brought the legal pad. I walked her through every line. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend. She just listened. When I got to the end, $347,000 versus 0, she put her hand over her mouth and didn't move for what might have been a full minute. Then she said, "I didn't keep track." I said, "I know. I didn't think of it that way. I just thought Warren needed more help. You were always so capable. You never asked." "I shouldn't have had to ask, Mom." She nodded, slowly. Her shoulders dropped. She looked down at the legal pad and I watched her trace the 0 with her finger, and her hand was trembling. The $54,000 was a separate conversation. My mother called me when the audit results came back, 3 weeks after the opening. Her voice was flat, controlled in the way people sound when they're trying not to fall apart. The accountant had confirmed the $54,000 transfer, plus the additional $11,500 Nia had found. Total unauthorized transfers, $65,500. Warren claimed it was a loan he'd intended to pay back. There was no loan agreement, no documentation, no repayment plan. The accountant called it what it was, a breach of fiduciary duty. My father, and this was the part that surprised me, was the one who acted. Gerald Beckett, the man who'd spent 30 years building his son up, called a lawyer. He revoked Warren's power of attorney. He restructured the account so both parents had to sign any transfer over $500. And he told Warren that if the $65,500 wasn't repaid within 18 months, he would pursue legal recovery. Warren called me exactly once after the opening, April 2nd, 2024. He said, "You could have told me privately. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone." I said, "Warren, your name was on the invitation. Mine was on the building." He hung up. The food editor from Birmingham Magazine wrote a piece, not about the restaurant, about the opening night. She'd heard everything. The article was tactful. No names. Just, a Birmingham restaurant's grand opening took an unexpected turn when a family member revealed their hidden role in the building's design. But everyone in Mountain Brook knew. My mother's phone rang for 2 straight weeks. Nia moved out of Warren's house in April. She rented a 1-bedroom in Homewood. She told me she'd been thinking about leaving for over a year. The favoritism, the financial recklessness, the way Warren treated money like it would always be there when he needed it. She said, "I didn't leave because of the grand opening. I left because of who he became when the truth came out." She meant, you had no right. Warren's first response when his wife told the truth wasn't remorse. It was accusation. And Nia saw their entire future in those 4 words. It's been about a year now. Not quite. 11 months since the grand opening. Copper and Vine is still open. Warren hired a manager. He's less involved in the day-to-day. The reviews are decent. 3.5 stars on Google. 4 on Yelp. The mezzanine is the most popular section. People post photos of the copper light fixtures. They don't know who designed them. I still work at Caldwell Reed. Treva put me on a performance improvement note for the disclosure failure. I deserved that. 3 months probation, extra oversight, an ethics review. I accepted it. I also got promoted to senior associate in November. My portfolio now includes 4 restaurants, 2 mixed-use buildings, and a community center in Irondale that I'm more proud of than anything I've ever drawn. My relationship with my parents is different. Not fixed, different. My mother calls me every Sunday now. She asks about my work, specific questions about projects, deadlines, what I'm designing. She's trying. It's clumsy sometimes. She'll say things that make me wince. "I always knew you were talented, Lori." And I have to bite my tongue because no, she didn't always know. But she's trying. And I'm letting her try. And some weeks, that's enough. My father wrote me a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't realize. He said that wasn't an excuse. He said he'd been thinking about the photos on the mantel, 11 and 2, and he couldn't explain it to himself. He said, "I failed you in a way I can't undo, but I can stop pretending I didn't." That letter is in my desk drawer, next to the legal pad with the numbers.
Warren and I don't speak. I don't know if we will. What I do know is that I don't hate him. I pity him, maybe. He was handed everything and still couldn't stop reaching for more. That $54,000 wasn't greed. It was habit. He took because taking was the only relationship with the world he'd ever learned. My parents are repaying my student loans. All $41,000. What's left of them anyway. They insisted. My mother called it a start. I didn't argue. It doesn't close the gap. It never will. But it's the first check they've ever written with my name on it. And when I deposited the first installment, $3,400 in May, I sat in my car outside the credit union for 10 minutes staring at the receipt. Nia and I have dinner once a month. She's dating someone new, a physical therapist named Cole. She seems lighter. She laughs more. At our last dinner, she said, "You know what I realized? I wasn't watching your family. I was watching mine. I married into it. I was becoming the next Lorraine, the one who does everything and gets nothing." She was right. So, here's where I want to talk to you. Really talk to you. Not as a narrator, not as someone telling a story for the internet. As Lorraine, the woman who stood in a building she designed and watched her parents celebrate the wrong child. If you stayed through this whole story, if you listened from the very first sentence to right now,
Thank you. I mean that. This was not an easy thing to share. The part about the photos on the mantle, the part about my mother's face when she heard the number, those are the parts that cost me something to say out loud. If this story reached you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own gap, your own version of $347,000, hit subscribe. Not for me, for the next person who needs to hear that someone else went through it too. And if you haven't hit that like button, this would be a good time. It tells me these stories matter to someone. It tells me the telling was worth it. I want to ask you something. Not a hypothetical, a real question. What's your number? Not the exact dollar amount, but the gap. The thing your family gave someone else that they never gave you. It doesn't have to be money. Sometimes it's time. Sometimes it's attention. Sometimes it's just the benefit of the doubt. What's your gap? Tell me in the comments. Because I think a lot of us have been carrying that number around for a long time, and maybe it helps to say it out loud. If you want to hear more stories, and there are more, believe me, this channel is full of them, they'll be waiting for you. Click on the next one. I promise you, you're not alone in this. Last month, I drove past the house on Claremont Avenue and my mother was on the front porch, watering the ferns. She waved, and I pulled over, and she held my phone close to her face to see the community center I'd designed. And she said, "You drew this?" I was free, and I was right there. This story is a work of fiction. Names, characters, events, and details are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is purely coincidental.